Good evening, everybody, and welcome to this South East Area Planning Committee meeting. Good evening, Councillor Helm. On the 18th of August 2021. I've got some feedback coming from somewhere. I don't know if that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. My name is Councillor Vanessa Bell, and I am the chairman of this committee. Before we commence the business of the meeting, there are a few housekeeping issues to run through. Members, the setup for the meeting has been designated to mitigate for COVID, therefore can I ask all present to work to the protocols agreed at Council on 29th of April 2021 in the interest of member and officer safety. We are streaming this meeting live as well as recording, and by being present in the meeting you are giving your consent to being recorded. Members and officers, during each item please put your hand up, raise your paddle. I don't think you've got paddles, have you? Put your hand up. Oh, you have. Wave your paddle or otherwise indicate somewhere where I can see you that you wish to speak. I will then invite you at the appropriate time. When invited to speak, please remove your mask, turn on your microphone and speak clearly. Please reference a page or paragraph number when referring to the agenda papers. Keep your contributions as clear and concise as possible and ensure your microphones remain off when not speaking. And finally, can I draw your attention to the notices on the agenda paper regarding the different levels within the chamber and advise that the fire exit door is behind the top table. Members, I'd also like to take this opportunity to introduce Alex Taylor, who is a new senior planning officer. Alex?
Senior Specialist Coordinator, Development Management. That's very echoey, that.
That's a mouthful, Alex, isn't it? Really?
It is. Can you hear me clearly? Just
yes.
Loud?
Yeah, can do. So I don't know if perhaps members would like to just go around and introduce themselves to Mr. Taylor. So.
Can we please remind us to use the microphones at all times when speaking?
We do have to use the microphones when speaking at all times because otherwise the recording won't pick it up. So.
Okay.
But so just switch it on when you're talking and then off immediately afterwards. So perhaps if we could start, Councillor Stamp, with you, please.
Yep, I'm Councillor Stamp, the leader of the council. Welcome. I think you know us anyway, don't you? I've had dealings with you. Yeah, thank you.
Yes.
Do you know everyone? Does everyone know Mr. Taylor? No, we'll continue to go round then. So, Councillor Boyce, please.
Turn off your microphone, please.
Councillor Boyce, member for Hawthorne. Brian Beale, member for Southminster.
Councillor Skeens, member for Burnham Crouch.
Councillor Helm, member for Mayland.
Councillor Channon, member for Mayland. Apologies for being late, Madam Chair. I went to the football club. My brain's not in.
I have done that the other way around, Councillor Channon, so don't worry, you are definitely not the only one. Thank you, members, and thank you, Mr. Taylor. So, moving on to item 2, apologies for absence. Bernard, may I have the apologies, please?
Thank you, Chairman. We've received apologies from Councillors Bassinger, Dewick and Hull. Thank you.
Thank you, Bernard. Item 3, minutes. It is recommended that the minutes of the meeting held on the 21st of July 2021, found on pages 7 to 8, are approved as a true and accurate record. I so move, members. Do I have a seconder?
Agreed.
That's a seconding. Agreed by assent?
Second, yeah.
Marvellous. Thank you very much. I think that was agreed by assent, Bernard.
Thank you.
Item 4, declarations of interest. To disclose the existence and nature of any disclosable pecuniary interests, other pecuniary interests or non-pecuniary interests relating to items of business on the agenda, having regard to paragraphs 6 to 8 inclusive of the Code of Conduct for members. Members are reminded that they are also required to disclose any such interests as soon as they become aware should the need arise. I think we're going to have some declarations. Councillor Helm.
Non-pecuniary interest. Mrs. Patton, Councillor White, is a councillor. I know her. And Nipsells Farm was owned by my grandfather several years ago, so I'm very intimate with Nipsells Farm. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Helm. Councillor Stamp.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm a member of Essex County Council, which have been consultees on this application. I also know Councillor White. I don't know Councillor White's husband. But I would like to say that some of us has received correspondence to do with the application. I don't think it poses any complications or alleged predetermination at all, because I certainly for one haven't made my mind up on this application, and we will debate it fully as the meeting goes on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Stamp. Councillor Chandler.
I'll speak with this one actually, Madam Chairman. Yes, just to declare the same reasons as Councillor Helm. I'm no Councillor White, or rather Mrs White, who is a councillor. I'm aware of her husband, Mr Patton. I've met him previously. I too received correspondence, but I see it that was perfectly in order, because any residents can write to members, as we know, and I get emails, letters from everyone, Madam Chairman, so there's nothing out toward in that whatsoever.
Thank you. Anyone else? I have also received correspondence from Mr Payton, and I just repeat what Councillor Stamp and Councillor Chandler have said in relation to that. So, thank you. Okay, that does bring us on to item 5, which is 21000628/full land north of Riversleigh, Nipsells Chase, Mayland. So this is found on pages 9 to 26. There is a members update in relation to this application that's been circulated. So can I hand over to Louise, please, to present the report? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So as stated, please note the members update, which confirms that no suitable RAMS legal agreement has been submitted, as well as clarification on some of the comments received by the applicant. This application seeks planning permission for a 2-bedroom bungalow. The planning statement makes reference to the fact that this is a live-work unit. However, this is not considered to be the case in planning terms. It's noted that the dwelling includes a study. However, this isn't unusual for a dwelling. A live-work unit would have to consist of both a clearly defined residential and employment use. The dwelling is also proposed to be a self-build dwelling, which again has been noted in the report. The planning statement considers that the applicant is on the self-build register and hasn't been offered a plot of land. However, it's not the responsibility of the council to offer land. The onus is on the applicant to attain one of the plots available. There is a total of 48 plots in the district, 24 self-build permissions and 24 sites granted outline permission that would be suitable for self-build dwellings. There are only 11 people on the self-build register, and therefore there are more than enough plots available. It's also noted that this application follows 2 previous applications which were withdrawn prior to determination. The application in 2017 proposed a dwelling in a similar location. This application was withdrawn prior to the committee meeting. However, concerns were raised in the report regarding the impact of a dwelling in this location on the rural character of the area. The application from May this year also proposed a dwelling on the site. Again, it was withdrawn prior to the committee meeting. However, concerns were raised in the report due to the impact on the character of the area and the inaccessibility and sustainability of the site. So this is the location plan showing the access taken from Nipsells Chase here. So this is where sort of the made and lit part of the road of Nipsells Chase ends, and this is sort of an unmade part of the road, and then the site here. So this is the proposed block plans showing the access road along Nipsells Chase and the proposed dwelling, including the driveway taken from the existing access into the site. So this is just a wider view of Mayland to give context of the location of the site and some of the points that have been raised in the report. So this is the application site here. The 3 red dots are the 3 surrounding historic applications that have been referenced in the report in section 5.1. So one dwelling was approved here in 2017. This site was considered to be in an accessible location as it connects to the main settlement by a sort of lit made footpath. 150 dwellings were refused and the appeal dismissed on this field here. So although it was refused, this application proposed a new footpath connecting to the made part of Nipsells Chase, so it wasn't refused on accessibility grounds. And then the other application was for 50 dwellings in this field, and again it was refused, but that also proposed a footpath connecting to the main settlement of Mayland. The 3 yellow dots are showing where the facilities are in Mayland, so to the west of the application site. So this is a convenience store, salon, medical centre and school. So these are not within walking distance of the site along a made sort of suitable footpath with lighting. So this red line here is a public right of way. However, again, as I've said, this isn't a made footpath and there's no lighting along here either. So it's not a usable or practical method of accessing the facilities and bus stops that are in Mayland. And then the 2 smaller red dots here and over here are the 2 bus stops referenced in section 5.1 of the report. And from looking at the timetables published online, there is no regular 7-day-a-week bus service that would be a suitable alternative to using the private car, which is contrary to the guidance set out in the MPPF and the LDP, which promotes the use of alternative modes of transport. So this is the proposed floor plan. So there's 2 bedrooms on this side, a home office, sort of main living area, and the garage here. And the elevation plans. Some photographs of the site showing the view north and south along the made road of Nipsells Chase. And then just one picture here of the Nipsells Chase leading up to the application site. These photos are showing the entrance to the public right-of-way that leads west into Mayland, and then the view along that public right-of-way. And then some of the views along Nipsells Chase to where the application site is located. Some photographs of some of the existing neighbouring dwellings, and then the open fields to the east. And some views of the entrance to the application site and views within the site. So the dwelling would be located off this access here. Overall, due to the inaccessible and unsustainable location of the site and the impacts on the character of the rural area, the proposal is considered to be contrary to the guidance contained within the MPPF and the LDP. Furthermore, an incomplete legal agreement has been submitted in relation to RAMS. The application is therefore recommended for refusal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Louise. So I do believe we have the applicant, Mr. Payton, who would like to speak. So, Mr. Payton, you have 2 minutes when the clock starts. So, are you ready? Can you remain seated, please?
I'm sorry?
Could you remain seated, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. But do pop your microphone on.
I think it is.
It
Yeah, it
is
is.
on.
It is
I can't see the red light from here. Thank you.
Okay,
When
right.
you're ready, Mr. Payton.
Okay. Dear members, Malden does not have a 5-year housing land supply, and sustainable housing should be granted. Mayland is one of only 4 sustainable villages in the entire district. A 10-minute walk from doctors, a nicer store, pharmacy, post office, hairdressers and schools. We changed our application to address reasons for refusal. It is a fact that the site now starts within the development boundary of Mayland. MDC note this, but then attempt to dismiss it. It was acceptable for a large development, but not our 2-bed bungalow. The village access site is now on public made roads. The unmade road is inside the site, so not a valid reason for refusal. If approved, it will create 7.3% new habitat. no effect on the countryside as it is screened by a thick hedge with houses either side and uses the existing drive. We have been on the self-build register since 2017 and the government is giving over £400 million to start a self-build revolution. Policy H3 states the council has an obligation to ensure that housing needs for all of the people in the district are considered. It does not state that it must only be for large developments. I'm upset that the specialist needs of my wife are not considered relevant by the MGC. Despite offering full medical records, the RAMS agreement can be conditioned. This is a sustainable village and location. The site starts within the village boundary. It will improve nature and habitat. Please grant permission for a sustainable home in line with the NPPF. Thank you.
Excellent timing, Mr Payton, thank you. Okay, members, over to you. Councillor Helm.
As I said previously, my grandfather used to own Nipsells farm and Mayland was my playground. The orchard from Bramley Way through past their site was all owned by Mr Blake, who used to walk around in black welly boots, blue overalls and a trilby hat. So I remember that quite well and we used to go regularly scrumping in the orchard. The Nipsells Chase itself is owned by the White family. There's only a small particle near the bottom which isn't owned by them, so they own the whole road. Dust carts must go down there. Morrison's, Tesco's, deliveries all go down there. And I used to cycle over Mayland from one side of the road, Mill Road, right the way through, just like that, easily. And what's wrong with the torch nowadays? Don't we use torches? Why do we have to have street lights? If you go to Burnham, Stony Hills, for instance, that's been won several times on appeal. Where's the street lights there? And then we say we mustn't be reliant on the car, but why do we have 2 parking spaces per house or more, depending on the size of the house? So that's reliant on the car, isn't it? And what's the reason why we can't use a Shanks's pony? In other words, our feet. We can walk anywhere. People are encouraged to walk to get exercise. So I don't agree with the recommendation, and I would recommend we go against the council's recommendation and approve this site.
So is that a proposal?
Yes, that's a
Councillor Helm?
proposal.
Do I have a seconder for that proposal? Oh, Mr Lee.
Chairman, firstly, obviously, before a proposal or after a proposal's made, we need clarity on the point. And as we know, we shouldn't be moving it until the end of the debate because it would appear, that until the whole debate is, people shouldn't be moving. So that's obviously the agreed protocol.
And we'll
yeah,
come
so
back
that's the
to your
agreed protocol, isn't it?
proposal
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
Councillor Boyce.
Chairman, a point of order on what Mr Lee has just said. I don't know whether this is a ruling for the planning committee only, but we debate motions that are proposed and seconded because otherwise there is really no legitimate debate until there is a motion on the table. So
Bear with while I take advice from committee clerk, please. If you will.
Through you, Chairman. Yeah, this is the advice that PAS have provided us as through the restructure, and obviously that's the process we have been taking recently as Chairman. We do questions, then the debate and final, because members are discussing a planning application. They're not actually discussing the officer's recommendation, so there's a difference in the protocol compared to a normal item in a normal committee. So that's just the suggested protocol. If members don't have to do it, but that is just our suggested protocol. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. That makes sense to me, Mr Lee. Councillor Skeens.
Yes, well, of course, my mind is completely open on this. It's difficult to decide. I do have concern about development in rural areas. I see that 2 larger developments in the same area have been turned down, and one wonders that if one is allowed, then more will be allowed. And I am concerned that we are a rural area and we must do everything we can to protect it. Of course, the hypocrisy of that situation, as some would view it, comes into play when a large development is allowed, not here, but in other rural areas, and we refuse the smaller ones. But I take the point that others have made, that if you allow a lot of smaller ones, that can create as many problems as allowing one larger one. My feeling is, at the moment anyway, that we should do what we can to protect the rural character that we've got. Thank you.
Thank you. I mean, I don't want to, but Councillor Helm has already drawn attention. Sorry, Councillor Helm, could you pop your microphone on for me? Thank you. Councillor Helm has already drawn attention to Stony Hills, and you know we all know what's happened up at Stony Hills, and we really don't want to see that happening in the district again, in my opinion. So one must be mindful. Councillor Channer, please.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just want to ask one question at this juncture. There may be others, if I may, when perhaps the debate goes on. Reference was made by the planning officer and so to one of the red dots, and yes, the 150 on the right-hand side of Nipsells Chase. And we've heard that in that instance, it appeared that the issue of accessibility didn't appear to come into the equation. But on this incident, it does. I'm having a bit of difficulty trying to ascertain what the difference is between the 150 that seem to have the accessibility and this application doesn't, bearing in mind that I believe this application has changed from the last one. I wasn't at the last meeting, but I think it was withdrawn anyway, but I think that report. So I'd just like to get that confusion out my mind, because I find that a bit duplicitous. I'm not criticising officers, but on one hand, 150 we say okay, it went down an appeal, but one individual dwelling, we're saying it's not okay. I'd just like to understand that better, please.
Can you help us out, Louise, with that? Thank you.
Through you, Chairman. Because the application was for 150 dwellings, they proposed a new road, a new access and footpath to join straight onto the made part of Nipsells Chase. So sort of joining this area down here. So it would have bypassed the unmade part of the road for sort of pedestrian access. So residents could have directly walked sort of along here to, you know, down to that bus stop or into Mayland. And because of the scale of the development, it's sort of reasonable to ensure that's carried out. But for one dwelling, it wouldn't be reasonable to require upgrading the whole road just for one dwelling under this application.
Thank you. Councillor Chan, does that answer your question?
Well, I've heard the answer. Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Any other members wish to? Councillor Boyce, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I just want to sort of pick up on one or two things that Councillor Helm has indicated, and that is the issue perhaps of sustainability. I think I agree with him that this is probably a sustainable area that it's in, but I accept that there are other concerns. For instance, leaving the other concerns aside for the moment, we have in Latchingham, for instance, we have in the middle of the village an unadopted road that lighting is not maintained by the highway authority. So they have to walk about in the dark in the middle of a village, in the middle of what has now been determined a large village, I believe. All of a sudden it's half as big again as Hawthorne, whereas it always used to be smaller than Hawthorne. So I have some sympathy with the application. I do believe it's in a sustainable area, but I accept that the other reasons for refusal perhaps are not so easily pushed aside. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Any other members wish to? Councillor Helm again.
Last time we had the Apple Store, and I did mention that the Apple Store couldn't be seen from anywhere unless you stood on a sea wall somewhere or really high up, because they've got high hedges and you can't see anything in the site from outside. So how can it be an eyesore in the countryside? and there's wildlife there. I mean, live on an industrial estate, and we have a rabbit coming to our patio frequently. Foxes and everything run around, so there's no deterrent against animals or anything like that, so they can thrive. The other condition regarding the rams, that can be sorted out by condition of planning permission that they pay this. So there's no problem there. I don't know what the other one was now. We've got sustainability, we've got the sight line.
Help me out, Louise, if you can.
Through you, Chairman. Yeah, sustainability impacts on the character of the area and rams.
Well, it can't impact on the character of the area because you can't see it from outside. Unless you go inside, and there's lovely oak trees and all that be protected by the council, all by condition. So, and there's a little orchard there and all sorts there. So that's that sorted. It doesn't impact on the countryside, full stop.
Thank you.
And it's sustainable as well. Thank you.
Thank you. If I could ask you to turn your microphone on.
Oh, sorry.
Please, Councillor Channer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I've heard what Councillor Helms had to say about the Apple store, and I think that's in situ on the site currently. But I think also approval was also given for a barn cum stables, and I don't know, was it a equestrian sort of area as well? I believe that was quite a significant structure as well. So I'm just trying to get that in my mind. We've got approval given for stables, etc. As I suppose without any dwelling that might operate nearby it. I mean, the orchard doesn't run that. So one could say, well, why was stables and a barn allowed? Was it seen as agricultural or what, you know, and didn't need to have a dwelling nearby? And then the apple store. So there are two structures coming onto that site already, which are deemed to be okay. So again, I'm trying to work out why a dwelling house is seen to be not in keeping and unsustainable, where one might argue an apple store, yes, okay, it would come from the apples on the site, but then also the barn and stables. Now, that's going to have traffic and things going to it, I would imagine, and the apple store as well. So I'm just trying to get that in my mind. Two structures being allowed, but not the residential dwelling. The difference is really between those three, to say two could be approved, or whatever they were approved, for whatever reasons, and the dwelling is not acceptable.
I will go to, I'm afraid I'm going to put you on the spot in a moment, but I believe the equestrian facilities were considered appropriate for a rural location, if I recall, but if you can help me out, Louise, at all.
Through you, Chairman. That's correct. The sort of storage barn and stables are accepted forms of development in the countryside, and a dwelling isn't. That's, you know, sort of what the NPPF and our local policies say. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Thank you. Any other? Councillor Stamp, I'm sorry, I couldn't see you behind the many layers of
Yeah,
face.
thank you. I have put my paddle up a couple of times,
Terribly
but I've
sorry,
given
you're
way.
just out of my
No, it's
sight
absolutely
line.
fine because it sits more. I actually agree with what many of the other members have already said, Madam Chair. Yes, I understand it's in the countryside. It's a 2-bedroom bungalow. The amount of meetings and applications I've heard and officers say that we need smaller accommodation in the area. I think our LDP identifies that anyway. I agree with Councillor Helm. I don't think it can be seen. And I think the Mayland is actually a growing village, whether we like it or not, like many other villages and towns in our district. It has got a doctor's, it has got many facilities, and believe me, I know exactly what they're like because I walk around them when I delivered leaflets or helped deliver leaflets in that area. So I've been driven around there, and I actually don't have a major problem, and I know that I could get into trouble for that from Mr. Lee, because he would turn around and say, Councillor Stamp, you're going to set a precedent, but I don't actually believe we are. The sustainable argument has been discussed for the past goodness knows how many years at this South East planning meeting, and I've sat there at the meetings when Councillor Dewick and everybody has argued for the sustainability argument, and I think we should be actually supporting people with disabilities. It's private. I don't want to talk about if they're going to be disabled, but have got actual illnesses and problems. And I know I always get talked down about this because I can't help it. I do believe that we should be looking after people and planning for the future. I'm purposely not looking at Mr. Lee because I can feel him actually staring at me. But I actually, oh, he's not. Oh, good. I take on board what Councillor Skeens said. about we don't want to attract development outside in the countryside, but I think we can see a lot of that that's already taken place, and I'm not saying two rights make a wrong, but I'm still haven't decided, but I don't see it as being such a massive problem as what the recommendation is at this stage. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. I will go to Councillor Skeens, please.
Yes, just briefly, I am concerned about the precedent. Of course, there have been bigger precedents, but I think if we get into the habit of allowing single dwellings in remote areas to occur, we're going to get a lot more of them, and we're going to have a lot of trouble controlling it. And I obviously have total sympathy with anybody who has an ill relative for whom they're trying to cater. But as has been explained to us as committee members many times, those personal circumstances, you can't take them into account because you're talking about the lifetime of the building, not the lifetime of the people. And if you're building to accommodate somebody who's unwell out of sympathy, that does not speak to the future of the building. So there is an issue there. So again, I'm in two minds, but those are my primary concerns at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Channer, please.
Thank you. Talking about on the personal issues, and of course I think we're aware what various documents say on that. I do recall in Hawthorne, and that is an unsustainable location, that's been proven many times at appeal, regardless of what it may have or not have. But I do recall, and actually I'm sure Councillor Boyce will remember this, being the ward member for such a long time, Smugglers Club ground. This council refused an application, and actually it went to appeal, and it was won on appeal, and it was allowed on the personal, it was said, because of the personal circumstances, health issues of the applicant at that time. Now, I think there was some form of condition that applied in that case, and I'm sure Mr. Lee can advise me on this, but I do recall that quite well, actually, and perhaps I don't want to put Councillor Boyce in the frame, but I do recall it on Smugglers Club ground because the parish were against it, this council was, but on appeal we lost it, and it was a case that the health situation of the applicant actually was a consideration in that determination of that appeal. I'm sure I'm absolutely remembering it correctly. Thank you.
That's very interesting, and I'd like to know more about that case, actually, because I think it would be helpful. Thank you. I'm not going to put Mr. Lee on the spot right now and ask him, though. So, officers, would anyone like to come back on any of the points that have been raised? Mr.
Sure.
Taylor.
Yeah. So I'll just sort of run through them. Can everyone hear me okay, by the way?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay. It's a bit, yeah.
Bit feedbacky with the visor on, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, you're fine, though.
So, in terms of the issue of the circumstances of the individual, I think we have to appreciate that this application would be granting consent for a building which will almost certainly outlive the needs of the individual. So then we need to move on to the circumstances of whether the scheme would be acceptable. In terms of screening, we have to be careful because much of the screening around the site is not necessarily something that's going to remain there indefinitely also. So again, we need to consider the impact in terms of permanence. It's clearly within the countryside. Looking at the aerial photograph, to me, I think this building could, in time, clearly become quite visible and would have a detrimental impact in that regard. In terms of sustainability, indeed, obviously, precedent has been mentioned. I think what we need to consider are the individual circumstances of the site. So, for one thing, we're aware that the road is clearly unmade and unlit and is not particularly, would not be particularly appealing to alternative forms of transport other than a private car. And therefore is not very well linked to the settlement. And that is the fundamental problem of the sustainability arguments. I hope that answers some of the points raised.
Thank you very much for that, Mr. Taylor. Councillor Helm did make a point about you can put TPOs on trees, which would mean that they aren't going to be removed in the future.
But I think that We also need to bear in mind that the test for TPOs is not in regard to providing screening for a building that needs to be screened.
This is true.
The test is whether it's of visual amenity value. So it's not an appropriate.
There may be valuable trees there. But
There may be or there may not be,
is
but
the
it's
same.
not. It's a misuse of the legislation.
Point taken. Thank you. Councillor Channer, and then I believe Councillor Helm
Well,
has a big hovering. So Councillor Channer first.
Just clarification, if I may, Madam Chairman, but bearing in mind I've referred to smugglers, and I would say that's quite a significant number of years ago, but what I just want to know is the officer saying there is no condition that can be applied regarding the personal circumstances of the applicant to say for the lifetime or whatever? I'd just like to have some clarification if there is any possibility that that is permissible. I think we did it with an annex in Mayland as well, if I'm correct. An annex being allowed somewhere and linked to, it was on the same site, but it was linked to a dwelling house. So it's just about this personal condition. Could that be applied to overcome perhaps some of the issues that have been detailed within the report and I think what members are raising tonight?
Thank you. I'm going to go back to Mr Taylor and then come to Councillor Helm. So if you could respond, Mr Taylor, please.
Sorry, could you ask the question again? Apologies. Okay.
Dear Chairman,
Delay.
as Mr Taylor didn't catch it, rather than
Sorry.
getting Councillor Channer to repeat her question. Members need to obviously recall the 6 tests in relation to the imposition of a condition, and they are, necessary, reasonable, precise, enforceable, relevant to the permission, and reasonable in all other matters. We do have the powers to impose personal permissions. We do have rights to impose temporary consents, and that is quite a powerful gift, and we need to balance that and only use it appropriately. Councillor Channer's referenced Smugglers Club, and I don't know the case off the cuff, but my assumption would be that that related to either a personal permission for an existing structure to be used as a permanent dwelling rather than as a holiday accommodation. That is very significantly different to the construction of a whole new dwelling. And similar things with an annex where you require it to be used as an annex or as ancillary accommodation. So once the personal permission or the individual or anything is removed from that situation, it can revert back to another use legitimately. So in case of Smugglers Club, it would have probably gone back to a holiday accommodation. In relation to an annex, it's unlikely it was for a specific individual, so they could use it for an annex, but also any other ancillary use, such as a summer house or a gymnasium or anything like that they wish. So for those reasons, there is an acceptance about temporary permissions or personal permissions. Things such as caravans or buildings that can be structures that can be removed quite easily can have a temporary permission because there isn't a permanence. There's not an unreasonable burden upon the applicant in the future to remove that. Guidance is that you shouldn't look to put a temporary permission on a building. And I would specifically say you'd be unlikely to advise that you should be putting a temporary permission, so in theory that it needs to be demolished, for want of a better phrase, on a whole new dwelling, because that just wouldn't be proportionate to the structure. And the point of a personal permission would be that if you would say that only the applicants were able to live in it, when, for whatever reason, that ceased, and, it could be for whatever reasons, the lottery could be won tomorrow and they move off, you'd be left with a white elephant, as in you'd be left with a dwelling that has no lawful use within the rural community area. And that's why the guidance would be that you shouldn't be imposing that in situations such as this, and that would be my advice, Chairman. Thank you.
That's helpful. Thank you, Mr Lee. So to Councillor Helm now, please. Oh, sorry, Councillor Stamp again.
Thank you, Councillor Helm. I think if you only have to drive around our district, you see many houses in the middle of fields. You only have to drive around Ashildon and Dengie, etc. And you do see, like I say, many smaller properties, little bungalows in the middle of a field that you could class as being unsustainable. I still don't see, I personally don't see and have a major issue with this one. And I apologise if I may vote against the officer's recommendation. But I think a small dwelling like that is okay. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I have to say I went to, I'll go to Councillor Helm and then you, Councillor Boyce, but I have to say I had the privilege of being a judge on the Modern Design Awards panel today, and I travelled all around the Dengie. I know Councillor Channy, you've done that in the past. And I did indeed come across some very unexpected dwellings in extraordinarily remote places. So yes, we do have such dwellings in the district. So Councillor Helm and Councillor Boyce.
Thank you very much. During the pandemic, we've all worked from home, be in a little room or whatever. So the point about live work is quite relevant. Whatever the word is.
Councillor Helm?
So we've all worked from home. All the officers in this council have worked from home. So they've used a room in their house to work from home and use it as an office. But have they got planning permission to use their house as an office?
Thank you.
Just the point I wish to raise. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Boyce.
Chairman, I said that I thought it was sustainable. The reasons for refusal 1 and 2, I'm quite happy that we can comply and overcome those, which leaves the legal agreement. So can I ask that if the committee were not to accept the officer's recommendation, could conditions be applied to overcome the reason 3?
Thank you, Councillor Boyce. Officers.
Through you, Chairman, it could be approved subject to suitable grounds mitigation or a suitable legal agreement supplied. Yeah, thank you, Chair.
You. Excellent. Members, are we ready to go? I think we've spoken extensively about this. So,
I think...
Mr Taylor is
oh, sorry, Mr Taylor.
I think I missed making one other point in the debate, which was to do with the rural structures that have been granted in the area. I just wish to emphasise that our policies do support buildings which are suited to rural purposes, subject to all the usual sorts of tests, but housing is of a fundamentally different nature, and it does change the character of an area from rural to suburban stroke urban. So I think we need to be careful about considering the argument of there being rural buildings that have been granted permission as setting a precedent for a house in this location.
Thank you, Mr Taylor. Councillor Stamp and then Councillor Skeens, please.
Sorry, did you say Councillor Skeens first? I'll give mine.
No, you.
Oh, okay.
Made you 2 people, Councillor Steens. Councillor Stamp, go ahead.
Yeah, I totally take on board what Mr Taylor said and what everybody else has said, but I think there's one, and forgive me, I should know the road, the one in Latchenden opposite the tea rooms. Can you remember that place that was approved? Is it a yellow brick house? Yeah. Is it that one? That's... Oh, don't go there, sorry.
Don't go there.
I won't go there then, Chairman. Yeah, it was yes, it maybe was one on appeal, but it was still... Oh, okay. Well, I rest my case. I'm wrong. I stand corrected.
Councillor Skeens.
I would say that we have to be careful in if we consider that there are houses existing that was given planning permission long before that are in remote locations. Fact is, the more houses that are built in a rural location, the less rural that place becomes. And
Indeed.
I'm really keen to protect the countryside if we can. That's my view.
Indeed. So, members, I'm going to go to a vote. Oh, no, I'm not. Mr Lee.
Dear Chairman, if that's okay, obviously, I think... sorry. Yeah, it's just a couple of points that were raised just recently that sort of, I'm not sure, and in the wide debate, I'm not sure 100% have been covered, so just as a general point of principle. As members have heard me say 1,000 times, you know, the starting point of determination of any application is the local development plan. The policies that we have clearly channel dwellings, new dwellings to either strategic sites or within the settlement boundaries. So if we're ever going to look to accept a dwelling outside of the settlement boundaries or the strategic sites, there needs to be material considerations that weigh in favour. And personal opinion, all things like that, as we know, members, is not a material consideration. So you need to see what the benefits or why the weight should weigh in favour of this scheme against other developments that would be outside the settlement boundary, because each application is a material consideration determined of another application. And a classic example would be Stony Hills, you know, an appeal decision that officers necessarily weren't for my time, but members obviously probably weren't keen on. A couple of overturns by members, and we've ended up in the situation where we are. So every decision does have bearing on the future. This site is remote in many terms in relation to access to a good footpath, then therefore access to facilities. The fact that the area is red brings it down to the road should only be given minimum weight, because at the end of the day the dwelling is where the dwelling is, and there's a requirement for the future occupiers to access the site through an unmade road. The distance is not insurmountable, it's a noticeable distance to that footpath along an unmade road, and if members are going to say that is acceptable, that will be a consideration in the determination of every application that is outside the settlement boundary in future across the district. If members consider that not being able to clearly see a new dwelling in a rural area because there is hedging up, that will be a consideration for every application in the future across the district. We are in a time when we haven't got a 5-year land supply, so there is weight in favour of granting permission, but that weight in areas where maybe members wouldn't be so keen will be even more difficult if decisions such as this are referenced, because this will be a material consideration. Members are saying that this have explicitly said that they consider these circumstances are sustainable. If members wish to consider that sustainable, that's in their gift, but I warn you, statements such as that make very dangerous precedent for future and for officers to be able to resist other forms of development. So, as I said, the starting point should always be the LDP, and the LDP channels certain development into, or residential development into, allocated sites and existing settlement boundaries, unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Personally, professionally, as the officer's report says, I'm not sure there's any material considerations of any significant weight, but members are able to give the weight to the material considerations that they see fit as they want to, and that is in their gift. And just in relation to the point about Councillor Helm raised in relation to live-work went, sorry, this is echoing back. It's,
yeah, no, it's difficult.
in relation to working from home, the point is that you can actually live in work from your home ancillary without it needing planning permission. This is where a live-work unit is. But the point is that live-work is the totally opposite. There is a significant work element in the structure that is sits alongside the residential, which is different to working from home where you're in your own office.
It is a thing, Mr. Lee, isn't it? Yeah.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Channer, and then I am going to go to a vote.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As Stony Hills has been mentioned, I think I spoke at every committee against Stony Hills, but I was being told by officers, bearing in mind an appeal or whatever it was, had gone that couldn't use the unsustainable or anything. And I did see what happened there. I'm trying to find it. I thought there was one relatively recently, and I'm not saying it was in Mayland or anywhere, but I thought there was an appeal allowed fairly recently on some dwelling or dwellings outside the development boundary somewhere. I'm trying to go through because I tend to keep them and find it, and I couldn't find it before I came here. But have we not had any appeal decision in recent times where a dwelling or two dwellings has been allowed outside the development boundary?
Apart from Stony Hills, Councillor Channer.
Apart from Stony Hills.
Mr. Lee.
Through you, Chairman, off the cuff I couldn't tell you the addresses, but I can guarantee there will have been, because material considerations will weigh in favour. You know, the point is, if officers wish to refuse a scheme outside the settlement boundary for dwelling, normally, obviously this is because of the applicant, but generally, unless it's called in, the application is determined at delegated level and is refused. If officers wish to grant planning permission for it, we have to bring it here because it's a departure, and there needs to be a natural openness and transparency to those decisions so that the public, other people can understand why that is going against the LDP, and that hopefully that is what the system facilitates. But as I said, there will always be granting of planning permission contrary to policy, because the material considerations weigh in favour of development against, and that is the, you know, that is, I suppose, to be honest, if you were to go back a couple of years, the most obvious one would be, the retirement community outside of Burnham, you know.
Yes.
But that's what I'm saying, you know.
Let's
but,
not
yeah.
talk about that, Mr. Lee.
But as an example, yes, there are planning permission granted outside the settlement boundary, but it's about benefits and harm. And as I said, it's up to members to weigh those material considerations in their own weight, in their own informed judgment. They're taking into account the planning merits of the scheme. But obviously, if the statements and the level weight that is given will become a standard and will be looked at again. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Right, I believe we had a proposal from Councillor Helm to go against the officer's recommendation. Do I have a seconder for that?
Chairman, you need the reason for approval before a seconder.
A reason for approval, Councillor Helm.
Is sustainable.
is sustainable.
What was the other? What were 3 reasons now? It cannot be seen from outside the boundary, and we can condition the contribution to that.
The RAMs, yeah. Mr.
Through Chairman, just for the clarity, it wouldn't be that it would be conditioned, it would be that the application, if members agree to grant planning permission, it would be delegated to officers subject to the, yeah, thank you.
My understanding is that the applicant has said that he is willing to do that, so that's kind of ticks that one. Do I have a seconder for, yeah, is that Councillor Beale there? So,
Can I ask a question?
You
Does
may.
Mr Lee think, because Councillor Boyce raised some, when he was speaking, he said about the first two could be answered or not mitigated the other way, so it's turned around, so to speak. So does Mr Lee think that those reasons, what Councillor Helmer said, are strong enough? So can I just have them repeated, because I'm a little bit concerned about those reasons that were given, if they're going to be strong enough.
Through Chairman, my understanding is that Councillor Helm considers the site as a sustainable location, and that as it can't be clearly seen from the public footpath because of screening, there will be no harm.
So what policy is that? What for?
Or it's not that they wouldn't, they're not conscious policy, they're just saying that they're, right, obviously through you, Chairman, obviously with reasons for refusal you have to give the policies, reasons for approval don't, because there is no conflict, because obviously in the reason for refusal you're highlighting the conflicts, and the reason for approval, the point is there is a silence on that conflict.
Right, I just wanted it to be really, really clear. Thank you.
my understanding is, we don't have to. Councillor Schemes, we
Just
have
very
a
briefly,
proposal.
I just want to raise the issue to everybody of the precedent we could set here today. Thank you.
Thank you. So we have a proposal to go against officer recommendations and to approve this application. So Bernard, can we take a vote, please?
Yes, Chairman.
Could we have a recorded vote, please?
No, I think we have to, don't we, really?
Sorry, can I just be clear exactly on those reasons again, the wording for the approval?
Through you, Chairman, there was also a second point to Councillor Stamps that I didn't answer, I've just realised, so I can do that for Councillor Channer if she wants.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's
and-
what Councillor Stamp, sorry.
Yeah.
I think that's what Councillor Stamp was wanting to know, to be clear on the wording.
Okay, so my understanding is that the site is in a sustainable location, and that as the proposed dwelling cannot be seen from the cannot be clearly seen from the public footpath or the footpath because of screening, there is no harm to the character of the area.
Thank you.
In relation to Councillor Stamp's point about robustness, I would say that they go very much against many appeals we've won in decisions. And sorry, Councillor Staples, can you confirm how far the site is from the made-up footpath? Roughly. But obviously, you know, making a decision that says that walking along an unlit footpath is a sustainable location, I would just highlight, for this sort of distance, I think would be a dangerous precedent. That's all I would like to say to members.
Chairman, can we have the distance before we continue the debate?
Through Chairman, it's 350 metres from the made part of Nipsells Chase.
350 metres.
Very roughly 1,000 foot.
Thank you.
You haven't got your glasses on, you wouldn't see. Sorry, Madam Chairman.
I don't know. Well, they could turn all the lights off at midnight anyway, don't they, across the district? So it doesn't matter where you are, you can't see where you're going.
Actually, it's 10 o'clock in Mayland, I believe.
Members, we're about to go to a vote, so Bernard, if you could take the...
Through you, Chairman, can I just get some clarification from Mr Lee regarding the legal agreement as part of that?
Chairman, the application should be committee should be minded to grant permission subject and but delegate the decision subject to the completion of a for RAMS mitigation, because there are a couple of options, but yeah, so it would be delegated to officers.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Members, we're going to take a recorded vote, and we're voting for Councillor Helm's proposal to approve the application contrary to the officer's recommendation. I will call your names in alphabetical order, starting with Councillor Beale.
For.
Councillor Bell,
Abstain.
Councillor Boyce,
For.
Mrs Channer,
Abstain.
Councillor Helm,
For.
Councillor Skeens,
Against.
Councillor Stamp.
For.
Thank you, members.
Carried, I believe.
That's four, yes, 4 for the application, 1 against and 2 abstentions. So that's carried.
So the application is approved contrary to officer recommendation. Thank you, members.
Chairman, shouldn't we, and I'm sorry, shouldn't we be adding conditions? But, I'm sorry if
I think we just
Mr. Lee has
delegated that
done
to
that.
officers,
I
did
know
we not?
reasons for approval he's done, but not necessarily conditions.
Through Chairman, yeah, if the conditions can be delegated to officers
Yes.
through agreement with yourself, consultation with yourself.
Absolutely, yeah. Delegated to officers, Councillor Boyce. Members, and that brings us on to item 6. Any other items of business that the chairman decides are urgent? I have none. So thank you very
Madam
much,
Chairman.
everyone. Oh, Councillor Howard.
There's been a couple of appeal decisions lately. One was Plant Pack about a fence. It was turned down by officers, but won on appeal. And then we approved the barn at Mayland, but that was turned down by an appeal decision, and costs weren't awarded. So we passed something that was waiting for appeal, which I did mention at the meeting,
You did.
Yeah.
I recall that, Councillor Howard.
and they would have turned it down, but we approved it.
Mr. Lee.
Through Chairman, by coincidence, if they are the 2 appeal decisions I'm thinking of, actually I'm fairly familiar with them. In relation to the fencing at the industrial unit, originally the applicant had suggested a hedging in front of the fence, but where the area is red was on the boundary with the fence. There was actually no space in front of the fence to actually put in a hedging. During the appeal process, the applicant changed it to actually being climbing plants up the hedge. So the mitigation changed, and therefore the concerns that with that. And in relation to the other point, is this the menage? Yeah, the menage was about a lawful development certificate, which the council refused because it didn't consider it incidental. The inspector agreed with that, and therefore it needed planning permission. It was therefore a requirement for the council to determine the application. So both things actually, officers are quite happy with the outcomes because that is what we were trying to seek, mitigation, and also that we didn't think that a menage was incidental, and that's what the inspector agreed with. There's obviously a big difference between a lawful development certificate and granting planning permission.
For sure. Thank you very
Chairman.
much for clarifying that. Thank you very much for clarifying that, Mr. Lee. That was very helpful. Members, I now draw the meeting to a close at 8:29 p.m. Thank you and good night.